Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is that you're tuning in, thank you for stopping by. This is the Martell Group Fireside Chats, where each week we sit down with an industry expert and get their unique perspective on the world through the lens that we all know as sales and marketing. Today we sit down with James Bellew, a fractional VP of sales with over 25 years of sales experience. Now, just because James is fractional doesn't mean that the core of what he does changes at all. Have a listen.
Have things changed in sales over the years? Yes, absolutely. All of the tools that we have to bear today are just changing, right? I mean, a year ago, ChatGPT didn't exist.
Right.
But I'll tell you what doesn't change as quickly. Sales is still a people game, right? Yep. So if you can take all of that technology, you can put all of the AI you want in something, but at the end of the day, sales is about me building trust with you. And that is still a people thing. You can throw all the technology you want at it, but at the end of the day, it's still one-on-one.
Now you might be thinking, Chris, how does a fractional VP of sales even work in today's market? Well, that's what we're going to answer on today's podcast. Without further ado, let's hop right on into it. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Martell Group Fireside Chats. It is so good to have you back here. Wherever you're listening, wherever you are watching, wherever you are tuning in, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Now, every week I say we have an exciting conversation that's going to come up. This one is exciting in a little bit of a different way. This one is we have a very unique guest today, and I'm super excited to kind of dig into this because I feel like people like our guest today, there's a lot of people like him out there. But there are not it's not really talked about a whole lot. I don't hear a whole lot about it, at least for me. So let's dig into this a little bit. Let's see what's going on here. And I think this is going to be a really enlightening conversation. So without further ado, I would like to introduce James to the podcast. James is a fractional VP of sales. Now, fractional, you hear fractional, and some people tend to kind of shy away from that. Some people kind of get excited about that. We'll dig into all of that and what it means, how you define that type of role here in just a minute. But first off, James, welcome. It's so good to have you.
Chris, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, well, it's good to have you, and I'm excited to kind of dig into your unique skill set because it's, you see VP of sales, right? Let's just take that tagline. You have VP of sales is pretty much who you are. And there's a lot of VP of sales in pretty much every company that you can think of in the world. Everyone's got at least one VP of sales, sometimes multiple. It really just kind of depends because sales departments are so integral to the growth of a company. You add in fractional to that, and it kind of starts raising some questions in a good way because there's so many different ways somebody can interpret that. So if you don't mind, James, break that down a little bit in terms of what you do, how you serve your clients as a fractional VP of sales, maybe a little bit of history and background. That way we can start setting the stage on who you are.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chris. Yeah, let me start with just a little bit of background. I won't go too far back, but I was, raised in the Bay Area of California. So Silicon Valley was my backyard. Naturally, and I'm a technology nerd. So, hey,
I love it.
Sales was written in the cars. It just happened, right? So, Silicon Valley, been selling since I was, this high. And over the years, I've worked for, startups in Silicon Valley to Fortune 500 companies throughout my career, which spans 25 years or more. We always say 25 years plus when you get to where I am. So it's always 25 years.
Got it.
So I started out in the traditional sense, right? And, over the years, I'd say over the last 10 years or so, I've sort of morphed that into working full-time for one company as a W-2 employee. I sort of got into the consulting kind of role. I thought maybe being a consultant would give me more diversity, more, more companies to work for as opposed to just one. And then about 5 years ago, I really stumbled on this burgeoning area of fractional executives. And it's nothing new. I mean, people have been doing fractional work. You've heard of fractional CMOs or CFOs or even CEOs and these kinds of things, right? But you didn't hear a lot about fractional sales executives,
Right.
fractional CSOs, fractional VPs of sales, whatever. And that really intrigued me because it gave me the opportunity to work with many, many different companies and share my expertise with them, because there's to be a fractional, a lot of these companies either can't afford it or it's not the right time for them to have a full-time person, right? So let's say anywhere from $1 million in revenue to 15 to 20 million, depending on the product or service that they're doing.
Sure.
But, it didn't make sense for them necessarily to have a full-time person. But they needed the expertise, right? So they still need that expertise. They still need that guidance from somebody who's been around the block. So that's where a fractional VP or fractional CSO comes in, is to help the small to medium-sized businesses that are in some sort of change. And we can discuss all kinds of different scenarios in that realm, but sure, they're in the middle of some sort of change, and they need some guidance and need some help.
What would you say is a typical setup for a company that would be looking for a VP of sales? Like I would imagine there's probably not a whole lot of employees, but you've probably got multiple people wearing multiple hats. So what is like an average or a typical structure of a company look like before you get there?
Yeah, let's go typical, because it's all across the board. But
sure, that makes
average,
sense.
right that average, right down the middle, you've got like I say, let's say a company that's probably in that $4 to $5 million a year range in revenue. They may have a couple of salespeople, one or two internal folks, right? The owner founder is usually still heavily involved, right? In some of the bigger deals. They're on the day-to-day stuff. They're managing the sales team. They may have a small marketing, they might have a small, a marketing person that runs their website and does some inbound marketing, those kinds of things. But it's usually pretty small. Usually, let's say somewhere around 6 to 10 people total in the company, and 4 to 5 million in revenue. Gotcha. And they're usually at that place where something's changing. They've gotten to a place where their product or service is starting to take off, and they need to they want to get to the next level. They just don't, but they need some help, right? They need that organized. They need somebody to come in and help them organize that and grow it to where they want to be.
Is getting a fractional VP of sales, because you kind of said it yourself, right? We've seen fractional CMOs, we've seen other types of fractional, maybe like consultants and stuff like that. I know us at Martell, there's a lot of us that are fractional. I'm fractional myself, right? So I'm familiar with that model. Is that a growing trend that you're seeing with certain sized companies or certain types of companies where they're more apt to like adopting a fractional, like bringing in somebody who's fractional? Or do you still see a lot of resistance in some of those areas where companies like, oh, we want somebody who's dedicated full time. We don't want somebody who's going to potentially split their time between me and 3 other people?
Exactly. That's a great question. I would say over the last, let's just say the last decade or so, but especially since right before and during the pandemic, there was a trajectory that was already going to very highly acceptable of those fractional roles, right? I think that people started getting used to that, and there was definitely a trend where that resistance was fewer and far between. Now that said, when we hit the pandemic stage, it just blew up like on steroids, right? Because people needed so companies got a big heavy dose of people working remote.
Yeah.
Right. So there was a lot of people who their resistance wasn't so much the fractional nature of it, but I've got to have somebody who's in the office. They physically have to be here, whether they're part-time or full-time or fractional or W-2, they've got to be in my office. And I think what happened in that the pandemic era sort of readjusted everybody's thinking about having people physically in a space, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to answer your question it is definitely a trend. It's going up, and I'm seeing it more and more, and people are definitely looking for it now.
Now, you mentioned that you're very interested in tech, a little bit of like a tech geek, if you will, and I'll share that mantle with you. I'm very much, you should see my office. It's insane. Do you have like a specific type of tech company that you work with? Is it products? Is it services? Is it a blend? Like what's that footprint look like for you?
Great question. I get asked that a lot. So I grew up, like I said, my whole career started in Silicon Valley, right? So it was all about software, hardware companies, small, large, whatever. But it was, the majority of the time I spent was definitely in the high tech industry. And then, of course, when SaaS became, more and more, a larger portion of the software business, that became a lot of what I was doing. So I spent a lot of time in that area. But so near and dear to my heart is that, right? Is that, but I'll be honest with you, Chris, here's my philosophy. And a lot of people, I can argue both sides of this. I think sales is sales. And I really look at it like, I don't care whether you're selling, software, hardware, money, services, or log cabins. When you're at that size of a company and you're growing and you need to build an infrastructure, a sales and marketing infrastructure that's going to get you to the next level, those fundamentals are the same.
Gotcha.
Right? So I really, although that's the high tech is like, it's fun for me. I love it. I'm a geek. I can geek out on that sort of stuff, right? But at the end of the day, my customers are now, or my clients are all over the board in terms of what they do. Today it doesn't really matter. So I don't go after a specific market type. If I can be of help to them, if they're in the right space, the right time, and they need the help that I can provide, it doesn't matter what they do.
Just out of genuine curiosity, do you have any like favorites that you've worked with over the past, or like if you don't have to like name names or anything like that, but any like specific types of products or services where you were just like geeked out of your mind, ready to get up every single day and make it happen?
Oh, all the time. So I mean, there was a couple of SaaS companies that I worked with that were, and just the market they were in, the place they were in, the innovations that they provided with the software to service was some of the best ones I've ever had, and the most fun, the most dynamic, were definitely SaaS software folks.
Yeah,
it's just very dynamic world, and it was a lot of fun. So I would say those were probably my highest highs. Were working with that in that market.
Yeah. Now I want to flip that too, because this just popped into my head. Do you have any stories about like the hardest things you've ever sold, or the hardest things you've ever had to kind of like wrap your arms around, where you're like, I don't know if this is going to happen?
Yes. So I guess I'll be talking against what I said earlier. It doesn't matter what they do, right? But there are some things that are a challenge, and I would say some of sort of in the hardware world. I mean, when you've got some stuff that is just super cool technology, but it is so niche, right? So I've had customers that it was such a niche market, and we're talking about like selling into, a manufacturing type, the end user was a manufacturer, right? So there was, that can get a little bit challenging because of the nature of the beast, right?
Yeah.
It's not as high tech, it's not fancy, it doesn't seem that way. It seems a little bit more, but it's a challenge because a lot of the companies have to learn how to make it sexy. How do you speak about that? Right? So they themselves get complacent with how, the piece that they have is a boring piece of thing that goes into a factory.
Yeah.
Right. So, one of the first things I got to do too is change their mindset about what they are selling and how they are selling it. But those can be challenging.
I almost feel like that was the state. I mean, there's so many different states of technology nowadays where that is true, right? Where it's either super niche or it's one of those where it's like, this is a cool thing to have. Like, to me, that's VR, like virtual reality. You know, like Apple just came out with their new thing, whatever it's called, and you know, there's companies like MetaQuest and HTC Vive, if they're still a thing. Like, there's so many companies out there that have like a virtual reality headset, but it's like, okay, what do we do with this? Like, what?
Oh, augmented reality. I don't think Apple calls it virtual. See, that's how they get around that. So, we're
okay,
not
fair.
Reality.
Yeah, we're totally not doing that. This is augmented, right? It's, you know, it's like every other, you know, iPhone preview that they give. We're like, this is just better, and it's like, okay, well, what's the practical application? Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the practical application of these things? And I imagine you probably run into that too, where it's like, you know, company wants to bring you on, they present you with this idea. In theory, it sounds cool, but now you have to create this roadmap of how you get it from the company to the end user. And I can't imagine that that's always easy.
It is not. No, sometimes, and you know, and you can get fooled too, because if something is really cool, and I have to guard against that myself, right? Sure. So that is just because of the nature of who I am and the personality I am and how I really love technology. Mm-hmm. You know, you see something, you just like, oh, that is so cool. Mm-hmm. But then when you really dig down to it and you get over that piece and you got to get your job done, that can be difficult.
I imagine that starts, you know, you with butting some heads against some people where, you know, if you come in, you're not obviously coming in and saying, hey, this idea is awful, you need to scrap the whole thing and start over. It's more of those, like, you kind of have to get past the emotional point of that, I would imagine, right? Where you're like, hey, this isn't going to work in this manner. And like you said earlier, you have to reframe the entire idea of how that's going to market. Do you deal with that a lot, where you're trying to overcome those emotions?
Yes, and I would say in a lot of cases, right, varying levels, depending on what the product or service is and all of that kind of thing. But absolutely, I mean, when you're, like I said, I'm working with a company that is usually the person that's hiring me is the founder of the company, mm-hmm. right? Which in some cases is it's their baby, right? Yeah. They may have even invented it. Right, they may be part of a team from an they come from an engineering standpoint or a software background, or definitely from the technical side of the business. Mm-hmm. Right, they haven't hired a professional CEO or anything like that. This is the person. So there is an emotional attachment to whatever it is that they are selling. Right. Yeah. So no matter what, in most cases, at some level, you've got to overcome that, or you've got to work with that. Yeah. And sometimes you've got to be just straight up blunt with them and just have a heart to heart and just say, I know this is your baby and you really envision this a certain way, but if we really want to get you from 5 million to 10 million to 20 million, we're going to have to look at this in a different way. Mm-hmm. So it's part of my job as a fractional to come in, just like if I was a hired VP of sales for this person or company, to come in and help them do that. So yeah, I do want to say one thing about from my perspective as a consultant versus a fractional. Yeah. I think that's an important distinction for a lot of folks, because it also goes to what you were talking about the interaction with the founders or the executive staff of the company that I'm working with, right? So when you have and to all the consultants out there, I apologize. I don't mean this, but I'm just gonna make this sound as black and white as I can. In a consultant's role, usually, okay, I'm hired as a subject matter expert to come in and analyze your situation and then give you a solution to it. Right. So, in some cases, it's like, okay, I come in for 6 months and, I write down everything I see. I talk to everybody. I interview everybody. And then I give them a binder full of, spreadsheets and say, here's the answers to your life. Good luck. See you. Yeah. Right. And I get paid and I'm out of there. So it's usually a short period of time, and you're coming in as a subject matter expert to get them, jump started, and then you leave. Yeah. A fractional VP of sales, look at me. When I hire a client, I am very clear to them. We don't I need to be integrated just as if you hired me as your VP of sales.
Yeah.
That's how you interact with me. That's the way I insist that you introduce me to the staff, right? And when I'm working with people, I am part of the team and not a consultant. I'm not coming in to fix you and leave, right? This is a roll up your sleeves. Let's work together to design this, to figure out how to build it, what we need to do to build it, get it built, get it running.
Yeah.
So my gigs usually last longer than a typical consultative role might, if that makes sense.
I appreciate you sharing that too, because I want to take a look at almost like the life cycle of when, maybe you would be with a typical company. And I'm sure every company is different in terms of like the timelines you spend with them or like the depth of your role within some of those companies. So let's take it from the very beginning. You mentioned you're going out and finding these clients, or do you have clients finding you? What's the discovery phase like?
Yeah, it's changed over the years, okay, right? Because I get more, get more referrals and things like that. But it's both, right? So the way I use LinkedIn a lot, right? Sure. So yeah. LinkedIn is my primary communication tool or branding myself out there. And I've gone, if I'm really busy, I sort of slack off on that, right? Just like anybody else, right. So, yep. but that is my primary vehicle for getting out there. So people, as people find me through LinkedIn, what I've done over the years is like I'm a fractional that specializes in sales and some marketing, right? But there's also fractionals that do other things. There's fractional CMOs, there's fractional CEOs.
Yeah.
There's all of these other fractional folks out there. There's consultants. There's people like organizations like EOS, for instance, right? That go into the small to medium-sized companies and help jumpstart them in a certain methodology or sales methodologies. People like EOS, they go in there. So I build relationships with these people that I don't compete with, but we're synergistic together, right? So if you have a CMO that's going in, or a fractional CMO or a fractional CFO that's going into a company, they see everything that's going on, right? Yeah. So one of the things is a sales or a marketing issue, and I built a relationship with that. They say, hey, John, you might want to talk to James and bring him in here as a fractional in the sales department to help you with that.
Gotcha.
So yeah, so that I've built that sort of that spoke model of all of these synergistic other fractional and other people who I don't compete with, but they can recommend me, and vice versa.
Do you ever have a company that approaches you, or, as you start digging into a company a little bit more, you kind of realize like, hey, this isn't like, you need a full-time person. You don't need somebody who's fractional. Do you find people who reach that stage?
Yes, that's a great question, Chris. So usually, at the end stage of when I leave is really to build myself out of a job, right? Okay. So depending on the company, for sure, because I'm helping build, I may help build the sales team. So I may actually hire the sales team. We might get to the point where we need a sales manager. We might get to the point where we're going to need maybe not a VP, but like maybe definitely a director of sales or something that's right. So whatever it is that we have built, the structures, the people, the processes, the tools that we've built together, then I'm going to hire somebody that can run that longer term.
You almost kind of go into a company almost with like the end in mind, in a way, it sounds like, because you're kind of sitting there saying, hey, at the end of X number of time, or whenever we reach these goals in my time here, like this is what the strategy is to get you set up to just go.
And there are some cases too, I definitely hire the right people to take over. So when I'm, as I phase out, that it's left in good hands and they're comfortable with that. And there are also times when that piece of it ends, but I still, they keep me on as they bring me in once a quarter for their annual, for their quarterly meetings.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Or things like that. So there's a longer term phase out as opposed to one day I'm there, one day I'm not. Right. But that also happens.
Talk to me about the process of building the team. Are you And again, every company's different. I'll preface it by saying that I'm sure that there's different needs depending on the types of companies. But is there like a general strategy that you approach every opportunity with to say, okay, I want to start here, and then this is going to be the next piece, and this is going to be the next piece? Does it look like that?
That's a great question. So again, everybody's slightly different. So I really try not to get into a rut in terms of or married to a particular philosophy or what I need to do.
Yeah.
Right. But when I go in, the first thing we do is just like anything. When you're hired to a company, you got to get the lay of the land. You got to understand what's going on. It's usually, but a typical scenario might be, yes, okay, the sales team isn't there.
Yeah.
Right. They may have one person, right? It's okay. So, the first thing we need to do is we need to take a look at the sales team and what people need to be in what seats to get the job done. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there's always looking at, okay, so what do we need in terms of people, processes, and tools? Those are the three things that I also look at. What roles, and you say people, what roles are missing? What processes are non-existent or need to be put into place, and do we have the right tools for those people to get the job done?
Yeah.
So at a high level, those are the three things that I'm looking at, and then some mixture of those, we just start building them. Right. So there might be from a sales point of view, we might be hiring internal people. We might be going out, and working with a company like Martel to go, hey, we absolutely need an SDR capability that we do not have.
Yeah.
Right. And when a company is that small, it doesn't make a lot of it. It's hard to hire an internal team, especially if there's market pressures and we need to get rocking. Right. There's just not enough time, space, or money to get that. So we hire internally, we outsource whatever we need to do, whatever that people, process, and tools. If we can't have it inside, we'll outsource it.
No, and that makes a ton of sense too, because it just like you said, there's no blueprint to this, but you have like those three kind of ideas where it's like, okay, we have to meet these needs. Like every company probably needs those things. So how are we going to obtain those and still march towards the goals that we have and all that other sort of stuff? Be able to kind of make the whole package work.
Yes, absolutely. And it falls into one of those three things 9 times out of 10. And there's a lot to that, but I do the same thing as I would as if they hired if I was hired by a company as their VP of sales. That would be, and I don't look at it as any different or try to act any different. Like I said, I try to stay away from being a consultant.
I'm gonna just imagine that the answer might be yes here, but do you ever run into friction internally once you get into a thing, right? Like, are you are you like button heads with whoever's in marketing or button heads with whoever's in product development, and just kind of like you gotta work through those challenges as if you were full time, right?
So the answer to that question is absolutely, right? There is no, and there's varying levels of that, right? But anytime you go into a new company, especially that's a small, tight-knit group, they've already have their set dynamic, right? So whether you're coming in, but it's the same thing if you're hired, right? When you walk into a new position in a new company, there's dynamics that are already happening that you've got to try to figure out what's going on and how do I fit in and what's the best way for me to maneuver into this. So I think the difference for me is I'm not hired, right? But I have a job to do, and I'm working for the founder of the company or the CEO or whoever, right? So that's my job. So I don't pussyfoot around, I guess is the answer, right? Yeah. So look, I'm not a bull in a china shop. I don't go in and try to like rip everything out and start, you got to be cognizant of the dynamics of the group. So there hasn't been one client where there wasn't something.
You want to make sure you don't like pull the rug out from underneath anybody and say, I'm
Right.
changing everything. Good luck.
Well, and that's what happens. Again, I keep going back to this, but if you're introduced or you're going into a situation where, everybody knows, hey, this is the consultant who's going to come in and fix everything, right? They've set that dynamic, and all of a sudden everybody's got shields up.
Right.
Right. So you got to come in and you got to be aware of that, and you got to work with what you have. But at the same time, we got a job to do. Right. And you got to build trust. You got to, you build that trust, and you get the job done.
Now, I want to shift more towards like the actual sales aspect of what you do. Being a fractional VP of sales, working with a multitude of different companies, different styles of companies, hardware, software, SaaS, the whole nine yards. Just from a general sales perspective, are you seeing a lot of change into how you're developing your strategies for these companies? Especially because from what I've noticed, you work with companies not just like in North America or not just in a particular region. You work globally, right?
Yes.
So are you seeing any sort of massive changes or massive shifts in terms of like how you're developing certain strategies or certain game plans? Like what's that landscape look like just for the massive umbrella that is sales?
Oh my gosh, that is such a great question, Chris. Here's how I'm going to answer that, because we could probably talk all day about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's a whole subject. But I can tell you, here it is this is how I look at it. Have things changed in sales over the years? Yes, absolutely. Or I would say yes and no. Here's what's changed, what hasn't.
Sure.
So the mechanisms that we have today that we didn't have even 10, 15, 20 years ago, or even 5 years ago in some cases, right, didn't exist, right? So the tools that we have today is what's changing, and what has changed rapidly, right? So, those are the things that are kind of fun. So we're employing different kinds of technology. We're employing different ways to, run our social media, all of our inbound stuff. How do we coordinate and process our outbound calls or field sales? Where do they fit in with all the technology today?
Right.
So there's that, right? So I would say that all of the tools that we have to bear today are just changing, right? A year ago, ChatGPT didn't exist.
Right. Yeah, that's usually what comes to mind in conversations like this.
That's a great example, is like in a 12-month period, bringing AI into the mainstream and actually using it. Now every CRM tool, every marketing tool, people
it's got it.
Has got it, right? There's whether it's a marketing gimmick or whether it's actually useful is, the thing that we need to figure out sometimes. But the point being that the technology and the communications change. But I'll tell you what doesn't change as quickly. Sales is still a people game, right? Yep. So if you can take all of that technology, you can put all of the AI you want in something, but at the end of the day, sales is about me building trust with you, with the prospective client, and solving their problems. And that is still a people thing. You can throw all the technology you want at it, but at the end of the day, it's still one-on-one.
I love that. And it kind of, it humanizes sales, because I feel, at least from my perspective, I'm sure that you've seen some of this too, ever since the introduction of AI and ChatGPT and even all of these different tools, right? You think of like HubSpot and any other like CRM out there will like start auto writing emails for you, or will start auto suggesting replies for you and stuff like that. And I know we found it at Martell, and I'm sure that you've seen it too, right? You remove that human aspect from it, the people to people aspect from it, and it's very easy to tell when a response or when some sort of general outreach has has been created or crafted by a machine versus having a human touch to it.
Absolutely. I mean, it has not gotten to the place in most, I mean, at the end of the day, some people, they go totally the other way. I don't want to use AI because it's fake. And no, you just use it correctly. If you're not using AI, you're going to get left behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that is something that I've, spent a lot of time in getting up to speed on.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to what you said, it's like, how do you use it? Where do you use it? And when do you use it as a productivity tool versus a crutch?
And that's a really big cornerstone to that too, especially with AI. Now, with that question too, for you personally, how are you staying up to date with any sort of trends in sales? How are you spending your time, besides letting Jesus take the wheel a little bit, right? It's, how are you staying up to date, especially in tech? Because tech probably moves a lot faster than some other areas that, that you could be working in. But how are you staying up to date with all of this stuff? Especially not even just you as James, the salesperson. Now we're thinking you, James, the fractional VP of sales. So you're not just staying up to date with one trend. You could be up to, however many clients you're working with, right?
Absolutely. And that's, again, great question. And we can all drive ourselves crazy with trying to keep up with everything. But I can tell you, one, I try not to get too crazy because I can't be an expert in everything, right? Sure. And that is, I look at my job just like I would as any senior executive job. Is like, I don't have all of the answers, right? But I know how to think. I've been around the block. I can work with people. I can work through problems. We can design together. I've got, I bring a lot to the table. I don't say, hey, I got all of the answers, right? Because that's not true, for one. It would be impossible at the other end. So how do I keep up? There's a couple of ways, right? In communication or in conversation. And what do I mean by that? So all of those people that I told you that are, that I have my community of folks. Yeah. I really, no matter how busy I get or whatever, it's important just to have conversations with people in different areas and continue those conversations. So block out an hour a day or whatever it is to be in communication and conversation, and not with just my clients. I'm talking about my group of people, right? Yeah. So I've got thousands of people that I communicate with on LinkedIn, but there's a handful of those that we have conversations weekly. Okay. So we're talking about things, we're looking at things, and they'll say, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? What about this? What about that? How are you using this? So in conversation is how I remain nimble in that. Gotcha. I don't rely on myself. I don't rely on just, doing my own research. Hey, chat, give me a list of all the new technology. Yeah. So it's in conversation, to be honest. That's where it comes from.
As somebody who is in, this VP of sales position within certain companies, right? You're kind of tasked with either building the team, building the revenue, creating the strategy, all that sort of stuff. You're not only going out into the market with the sales plan, but you are probably also targeted, right? Like you are having any sort of sales title in general, whether it's fractional or not, you're probably targeted for a lot of outreach, a lot of, companies that are reaching out to you to try and sell you whatever it is, right? Through a various campaign. What's sticking out to you? How do I need to get James's attention, instead of, having my email being sent to junk, let's say, what are the things that are sticking, or the methods that are sticking out to you?
The old saying that, doctors make the worst patients. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like that, right? Right. Salespeople make the worst leads. Yep. So, and I say that half joking, but there's a part of it. And I'll be honest. I've tried, especially lately in the last few years, I've really tried not to guard against that. because I'll tell you what happens too. I get a lot, you're right, I get a lot of outreach. And my first thing is click, click, click. Yep. Don't answer the email. Don't, if it's through LinkedIn, don't answer, or don't friend them. I don't do anything. I don't connect, whatever. So I've started to actually try to take those calls. Y'all know what a sales call is, right? Because it's a number I don't recognize, and I know 9 times out of 10 this is going to be a sales call. Mm-hmm. I've actually started taking a number of those.
Okay.
And there's a couple of reasons why. One, it helps me understand how people, especially SDRs or reps, are talking to people in the world. Like, this is a real world thing, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm building teams that are doing this. So I want to start to hear how are people interacting with me? Mm-hmm. That's one. But I'm not being just that selfish. There may be something, and this has happened when I took the call, and it was actually useful.
Okay.
Right. So the two things I've started taking many of those calls. I'm not as apt to hang up on people or not take the call or not connect. Like, okay, I try to hear them out. One, it's educational for me. It keeps me on, and it gives me good ideas. Mm-hmm. Or I can use an example of, hey guys, here's a great example of what not to do.
Yeah. Nice little training piece, right?
It is. So I'm actually taking more of those calls. But I do get a lot of outreach, and seriously, since, like you said earlier, technology moves fast. There's things things are moving quickly out there, and I don't know. So I want to hear them out. I want to see, is this something that might be useful either now or something for me to think about?
Yeah.
I also try to I can build my network that way as well, to be honest.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is it behooves me to be a little bit more empathetic with the calls and the outreach that I get, as opposed to being shut down.
And I'm sure that ties into like the previous question, right? Where how you're staying up to date with things. It's digging into how people are reaching out to you, because, you could always learn a thing or two, right? Or you could always learn Absolutely. What not to do, to your point earlier, to say, hey, we do that internally all the time, right? Where we'll get an email and say, hey, tell me what you like, what you don't like about this email, and whether or not, I accepted the email or not, right? And you can run people through that kind of like, a continuing education exercise until everyone understands.
Absolutely. So I have found I am a much and it puts me in a better mood. I'll be honest. To be more empathetic and also to engage in the real world people who are outreaching to me puts me in. Before I was like, I just wish I don't want these sales calls. I don't want to talk. I don't have time. I don't need this. No. Right. And it put me in a worse mood from my point of view. So when I'm taking these calls, whether I need it or not, I'm learning something for myself or my teams, and I actually feel good not being a jerk.
When you put it like that, it makes a ton of sense, because I even find myself just like getting a handful of calls daily almost, where it's like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't care to talk to you. But I've found myself either starting to pick up the phone every once in a while, or, at least like reading through some of the emails that I get, because there are some instances where it's like, okay, I really like the way that you proposed this question, or I really like the way that you had your subject line set up, or something like that, because those are all bits and pieces that anyone can learn from, and to try and do better at what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I don't want to give the impression I take every one. Yes, but I do. I just randomly select one. Like, okay, I've a few minutes.
You are the winning contestant of the day.
You are the winning contestant, and you know what? I have hired SDRs that have called me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened in the past a handful of times where it's like the person on the other end of the call, because I picked that call up, and the way that they interacted with me, the way they spoke to me, the way they listened, said, "Oh, I don't need what you're selling right now, but if you're interested in talking about a possible job."
Yeah. Like flipping the script on them.
Yeah, that always I go, yeah, that's always like, what?
Like I wasn't expecting that. No, I love that. Well, I know, James, we're kind of coming up on some time here. I want to be respectful of that. And like we've said a couple times, we could sit here and deep dive into some of this stuff all day. And I'm sure that if we pick this conversation up in 3 months, we'll have an entirely different one because of the way that things are moving so quickly, the way that things are changing so quickly, all that jazz. But, I want to be, again, respectful of your time. I do want to ask you just kind of as a final, question here. I always like to ask this of all my guests. If somebody was looking to get into doing what you do, whether it's on the consulting side, the fractional VP side, even like a type of fractional employee, let's call it fractional marketing, fractional, whatever. What's some pieces of advice that you would give that person to help them along their path or help them down that road, in their professional career, let's call it?
Man, there are so many. One of the things that comes up for me for folks a lot is they don't know, they hem and haw about it.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is usually if you're becoming a fractional person, you've had some career working for the man.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So wherever you're at your career level, I run into a lot of folks that are maybe in the later stages, right? They're already in an executive level or, director or VP level person, and they are not happy where they're at anymore.
Okay.
But they don't know how to make the transition. Mm-hmm. So I'll tell you what was the best advice from my point of view is, I know this sounds trite, but it's just do it.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. If you don't let that scare you, and just you gotta jump in. One of the ways that really helped me was there's an organization. In fact, they're still around. They got bought by the same company that owns EOS. It was called Sales Acceleration. And they were a company that was founded, maybe 18, 19 years ago to help executives make that transition, sales executives make that transition into a fractional world.
Okay. All
right. And over the last 5 years, they just create. It's like if you don't want to do it by yourself and you want to get into a built-in structure that's going to help you get there, something like them. They're not the only ones out there, but Sales Acceleration helped me make that transition. So the people, the processes, and the tools that helped guide me, the VP of sales at XYZ company, and start my own and branch out and do my own thing and refine it. Yeah. So that long-winded answer is, find an organization that has a structure that you resonate with, right? And there's many of them out there, and look into, going into an already structure can help you make that transition.
And I'm sure that helping hand, in a sense, right, can really help a lot of people understand that there are more options than maybe what they're just stuck in, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah. I would say a lot of people they just don't know how to do it. It's like, okay, well, it's like starting your own business, because that's what you're doing. You're starting your own business, and that could be daunting, especially if you've got a mortgage, you've got car payments, you got kids that are, maybe getting ready to go to college. You got all of this stuff, right? And yes, I may be unhappy, but now's not the time for me to make that transition, right? I can't be without but what you can always do is you can start off small. right? And then transition out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say for most people is just do it, please.
Yeah.
You will be a much happier person in most cases if you do that. Making less money, working for yourself and doing what you love, the higher paycheck in an organization that you are not passionate about anymore. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And honestly, just doing it is that's a great way to kind of wrap some things up here, because I think that really kind of encapsulates the idea of, being your own boss or going out and doing your own thing. Like you said, being a business owner, right? Like I resonate with that because that's what I am at the end of the day. It's what my wife is at the end of the day. And so that's, that first step is always scary, right? But it's almost designed to be scary because it's new. It's kind of exciting. It's everything that you aren't necessarily expecting, but like this is where I need to go. Like I'm not going to do anything else or grow into anything else doing what I'm doing just repetitively until I make that first step and just do it. Like, just like you said.
Yeah. And it gives you the freedom to do all kinds of things. So my wife and I are both fractionals. So, we live in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
So, that we would have never been able to do that had we not made that transition. Mm-hmm. But we made the decision and just said, we're going to do it.
Yeah. We're going to make this happen anyway.
We quit our jobs and transitioned into fractional work. And yeah, it's scary. And it's, when you start your own business, it absolutely is, but it's the best thing that we ever do. We're healthier mentally and physically for doing it.
I love that. Well, James, thank you so much for the conversation today. I had a really good time just getting to hear your perspective. I think I said it at the beginning, right? You don't hear a lot from a whole lot of fractional folks. You know that they're out there, but just getting a chance to semi deep dive into your mind, I found really intriguing, right? And just kind of getting to hear your approach and perspective to everything. So I really appreciate the time today. And I'd definitely be looking for an encore, maybe re-recording or kind of recording again, maybe later this year or something like that, just to hear what's changed, what's new, what's exciting, to you. Shout out once again to James for spending some time with us on this Fireside Chat. I really appreciate it.
Chris, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Being a VP of sales for an organization is one thing, but you add the fractional responsibility on top of that, and it's a unique opportunity that I believe James really shines in. And I hope you got just a taste of that on this Fireside Chat. If you have a favorite part you enjoyed, feel free to leave a comment down below and let us know your thoughts on this chat with James. Be sure to like the video, consider hitting that subscribe button, and turn on notifications so you can be alerted when future chats go live on our channel. Thanks for listening, and as always, happy hunting.